Good evening to you all. So wonderful that you could join me this evening for the second part of this series of sharings. This is not a discourse, or how to say, like a lecture, with practical tips of how to plant a food forest. This is more a sharing of my journey, and how that journey looked and unfolded, and how that led to the narrative that I've started to share now. So last week we gave the first talk, and we started with where I was born and going to the Jiddu Krishnamurti school, and my introduction to coming to India, and also um, and also also starting, coming to Auroville and starting Solitude Farm. And the talk ended with me meeting Fukuoka in quite kind of like a magical way. So that talk you can see on my YouTube. So please, go and check it out. And this is the second part of that talk. And so basically, we're in Solitude Farm. I've been away for 2 years. I've come back to Auroville, and by the grace of God, the constellation, the stars, or in Tamil we say my vidhi, my destiny, I've met Fukuoka, spent 5 days with him in Vandana Shiva's farm, and come back to Solitude, and have, with all intents and purposes, very clearly had an aim to start developing the farm in the light of the teaching of Fukuoka. So in case you don't know the teaching of Fukuoka, it's all about a non-interventional agriculture, an agriculture that moves away from an anthropocentric point of view, a dominating nature point of view, which has been man's story for the last, I don't know how many hundreds of years, um, to an agriculture where you recognize the intelligence of nature, and you work with her natural systems. So Fukuoka developed that over many years, and his first and primary aim was growing rice without plowing. So that's what we dived into at Solitude. We were like, we're going to be the voice of Fukuoka, the example of Fukuoka in India. And so we started to explore what that meant. Now, what that meant for Fukuoka was flooding a field, because he had a river next to his field, and he grew clover in the field. And with the clover, he also had rice in pellets that were lying over the summer. And he'd flood the field, the clover would die, and basically the rice would emerge up through the decaying mass of the clover that was rotting because of the flooding. And this system of direct sown, non-tillage rice cultivation was really what Fukuoka became sort of well known for on a sort of technical level. Of course, his philosophy is common around the world, and is not dependent on a certain type of farming, and that we've understood over many years, because now we don't even grow rice. But Solitude is probably one of the best examples of a non-interventional farming that you can find. Um, and um, and so we had to find ways to suppress the weeds, because that's what he was doing with the water. He was flooding the field and making the ground cover die, and then the rice was coming up. So what we did is we started to work with a bean called black velvet bean. Um, I hope that my pronunciation is right. I think it's called Mucina purensis. It's a very, very vigorous vine that is well known in Sanskrit as secret self, because it has dopamine. Has L-dopa, which is a precursor to dopamine. So it's the secret self. It gently uplifts the spirit, if you like. It's good for Parkinson's disease, and it's an aphrodisiac, and it's also good for reverse diabetes. No, we didn't know any of that at the time. Now we actually serve it in our cafe as a dopamine coffee, and we use it in the curry sometimes when it's immature, which is about to start now. We'll start to add that to our curries, and and we were using it more as on a technical level. So it would grow in such a vigorous way. It would grow like about a meter tall, like this thick, bushy creeper everywhere, very dense. And underneath it, there would not be a single blade of grass. And what we do is we'd sow rice into that creeper. We'd cut that creeper. The creeper would die, and decay, and the rice would come up through the decaying organic matter of the creeper, because here in the subtropics it would decompose very quickly. So that was a very interesting way, and I would say it was an elegant way of farming. There's no machinery, no extractive economy. That means building tractors and oil rigs, refineries, tankers, pipelines, and petroleum. None of that was needed. This was so simple. You did need hands, you needed people, but there was so much enthusiasm for this experimental way of exploring a road back to nature through Fukuoka's vision, that everyone was happy to come and help. And over the years, we had varying successes with this. One of the problems with it was that when we sowed the rice into the black velvet bean, we often had either too dense a germination in certain spaces, and in other places maybe not enough germination. So we ended up having to do some thinning and transplanting. So what was very difficult was to transplant into a dense organic matter. It's much easier to transplant into an empty field, and you see that in when people are planting rice in excuse me, in China and Japan, in India, just check, 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 check. So it's an empty field, very easy to transplant. So that was one of the challenges. And what happened over the years is that we actually, started to explore doing this without the black velvet bean, and we did it with peanuts. We did it with cowpea. We even did it at times with ragi, which is a millet. So we'd sow the rice into the millet, cut the ragi. As you're walking through the field, you'd trample the rice, the grains into the soil, and then you'd harvest the ragi, pull up the stumps, and put them back in the field as a mulch, and then the rice would come up through that organic matter. So we had varying degrees of success with that over the years, and mm, just trying to remember all how that happened. But I would say there was an excitement about that, an excitement about showing people and showing ourselves that growing rice in a different way was possible, and we were eating that rice as well, and that was a marvelous thing. And sometimes we were pounding the rice and milling it ourselves, sometimes sending it to a friend's farm where they were milling it on a stone, on a grinding stone. But I think that experience to sow the rice, harvest the rice, mill the rice, eat your rice, there was a massive reconnection happening there. And then we were exploring which types of rice to use. So there were either long duration rices that you started with the summer rain. So the summer rain came in sort of the end of July, and it would and that would go then through August, September, October, where the main monsoon would come. November, full monsoon. December, still some of the monsoon. January, and then harvest in the end of January. or it was a shorter duration rice of 3 to 3.5 months that we would sow at the beginning of the monsoon, and it would grow just through October, November, December, and we'd harvest it in the middle of January. So those are we were looking at a lot of things, and what we came to see is that there is every year was different. There was one year there was a lot of summer rains, so the black velvet bean grew so well before we had to sow the rice. Other times we hadn't managed to save enough seeds of the black velvet bean. Other times we found that it didn't work so well for maybe, I don't know, various technical reasons. We hadn't sewn it well enough, or maybe, there's so many um, diverse reasons why it was succeeding or not. And while this was going on, and we were really, really, really engaged in the farm every single day. While this was going on, we were exploring also how to grow sesame and peanuts and other millets like Varagu millet, and that we were still doing with bulls and plowing in a very traditional way. And that was really following seasons. So it was like August 15th, you had to sow the Varagu. There was no two ways about it. You were there. You made sure you'd had compost. You'd bought in bullock carts, so we were all in going to the village and loading compost onto bullock carts, spreading it in the field. Many times going to the villages, helping the plowman bring his plow, um, making sure the plowing happened properly, up at the crack of dawn, because that's when the plowman worked, and making sure that crop got in, and then praying that the rain came. We were very dependent on the rain to get those crops going. They were really dry land crops, and I would say all of this was an apprenticeship. It was all of this was a learning. I mean, it's not like we're not learning now; we're still learning. But all of that was a massive learning. Um, but I started to get other visions. Like I remember being in this big 1 acre field of peanuts and thinking, what if this field had lines of bananas, papayas, and tomatoes, and then brinjals, and more papayas, and then more bananas, and became like really a field of production that we can feed a community. So I started to understand the importance of community and feeding a community. So slowly, that started to happen, and it started to happen actually by fruit trees. So we went to a nursery in Salem, and we came back with loads of fruit trees, loads of fruit trees. And those are many of the big senior trees we have in the farm now: the bale fruit, the mango, the chikus. Many of those were from that nursery. And we used to fill up buckets of water and have them on our head, and carry 20 liters on each hand, and water all those fruit trees by hand. When I look back on it, it was crazy how much care we gave. And I think we gave so much care because I think in years before that we had lost so many fruit trees, because maybe that dedication, or that clarity on how much love and focus and presence was not quite there yet. So now it was really there. We weren't going to lose those fruit trees. And so that whole 1 acre got planted with the fruit trees, and we were like, okay, so we're watering the fruit trees. What can we water? What can we plant next to them? So then there became papayas and bananas. And I remember one year, around every fruit tree we got tomato seedlings from the village, and then there were like hundreds of tomatoes around each fruit tree, and we had just so many tomatoes, and it happened so easily. And slowly we started to understand that these crops, that it's not so difficult to farm, that this is something that can also happen in a very easy way. Um, so this is 2003, 2004, 2005, and it's around this time that I met my wife, Deepa. So my wife is from Tiruvannamalai, and I remember very well there was I was at Johnny's place on a Sunday. Johnny is our sort of cult cult action hero figure in Auroville. He's studied with Buckminster Fuller back in the 60s, and he's an architect, a sailor, a farmer. Um, he writes amazing hip hop. Um, he's a very good playwright, a very good teacher, and a carpenter. And we've sailed from Africa to Gibraltar on a 100-year-old boat without an engine. And these things happened in between, like doing all the rice and stuff. And so I was at Johnny's place, and every Sunday there would be a potluck picnic, and we'd all go there and have lunch together. And then there was one friend who I haven't seen for years, and I saw him today actually. And there were amazing classical guitarist called Ashman. And I said to Ashman, "Hey, Ashman, it's my birthday today. Why don't you come? We're having a party." So he said, "Can my friends come?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So everyone came over. There was a big party, and but party for us means we're still like on the floor blowing the fire. So we're making some food. We're still kind of basic. And I remember meeting Ashman. Ashman had brought some friends with him, and they brought their friend with them, who was Deepa. And Deepa was from Tiruvannamalai, and we sort of hit it off. And then she came to stay here, and then how what happens, and life happens. And then I was like, well, how can we be here together? Because we weren't quite ready to get married. And I said, look, why don't you come and say you're working here? So she started to just come, for weekends, and tell her parents she had a weekend job. So she came and worked on the weekends, and did some, helped out or whatever we were doing. And I remember at that time we had a permaculture workshop was happening on the farm, and the guy running that permaculture workshop, they asked if we would cook for the workshop, and we said, "Yeah, sure," because already we had a lot of volunteers, and everyone loved the food that we made. So we did the lunch, and I said to Deepa, "Hey, look, this is really good. This could work. Why don't we start a restaurant, and then you come and work permanently?" And this all happens kind of quickly, but over a few months, and then by the time you know it, boom, we got married. We got married in March of 2007, and we got married in her aunt's Koladevam, which is the family deity, in a place called Senji. So after Senji, you had to walk in the forest for like, I mean, it was a good hour and a half walk to get there. And when you got to this ancient temple with these ancient statues, what we call munis, they're like, I don't know, emanations of Vishnu or something. Um, they were, it was like that no one's been there since the Ramayana times. It was like so, like in the jungle. Then behind the temple there was a river, and then you'd walk along the river. And this we found out again, this was like a few years before that friends of ours in Auroville, like in Auroville, it's very well known for saving indigenous seeds. So Auroville is an example of a reforestation success, where not only have trees been planted, but the indigenous trees of this bioregion have been planted. So groups of people, specific groups of people, would go off to find these seeds, and this place was one of the places where they go. And one time I had gone with them, And again, actually with Johnny, because Johnny would always lead an adventure, and especially on a full moon, jumping in the back of a lorry with 20 kids and climbing up the mountain. So we knew this place. So in my marriage, we were there, and on top of this mountain, where you would climb up there for another hour and a half, and you'd find all of a sudden a sort of a granite gateway and steps, and eventually there was a place to swim and drink water, and you'd spend the evening up there. So that's where I got married, but not on the top of the mountain, at the temple at the bottom. And that was quite amazing. And that was the start of my marriage life, which was in 2007. And I don't know how it is for other people, but I feel like marriage for me was a catalyst. You know, very quickly after we got married, we within a year we had our first child, Chandani, who is now studying in the Krishnamurti school in England where I studied, and she's 17 now. And I remember just after she was born, we my band had their first international gig in Glastonbury Festival, and this was also something that was going on. My music was like really getting a good exposure. We got signed with a record label in Mumbai, um and on my marriage we had an amazing party at the farm where the band played. And I think what happened was a girl gate crashed the party, and she said, "Oh, you guys are so great, and I'm gonna get you in at Glastonbury." And we were like, "Yeah, yeah, right, no problem. Enjoy the party." But then, a few months later, she had an invite for us at Glastonbury, so we're like, "Wow!" And as I'm sharing all this with you, you have to understand that these things are all sort of interlinked together. The thing about music that took time for me to understand, but eventually we were playing shows in Mumbai for, the big cats, the millionaires in Blue Frog, and and the insights came to me that music is an adhesive within a society as much as those vegetables were, and it brings people together. And it was at that show in Mumbai we did a couple of times, we played there, that I realized that I want to start my own music festival on the farm. And that gave rise to Lively Up Your Earth, which is an eco music festival. We've done about, I don't know, 8 or 9 of them at the farm, with the biggest ones being 1,500 people and 15 bands, and amazing musicians. I've always been lucky to be having amazing musicians around me. I guess that's because of Auroville. My band Emergence, the first bassist had worked with Ray Charles, and we played with flute players who were in with A. Rahman, Slumdog Millionaire, and more recently other A. Rahman flute flautists, and very good, very very good musicians. And yeah, seeing, that didn't happen immediately, the festival, after playing in Blue Frog, but it took it within a couple of years. That did happen, and at that time there were a lot of volunteers coming to work at Solitude, coming to see what we're doing. And as that all started to grow, we started to get the idea to start a restaurant. um I think it was largely defined because we didn't have any money. And it was like, I mean, this farming is great, but we're not getting any money. I don't even think we had any workers. Maybe we had one lady working in the kitchen, but we didn't really have any employees as such. Maybe we had ladies who came and did some weeding once in a while. And it seemed to be clear that we needed some money, so we started this restaurant, this farm to plate restaurant. Solitude Farm Cafe, it was called and still is called. And me and my wife Deepa, we said, okay, well, let's just do it. Let's just do it a few times a week. Let's not do it every day. Let's do it a few times a week. And again, we got Johnny to do a T-shirt. So he did a T-shirt for us with a stencil, and and people started to come, and immediately we started making money, not huge money, but there was a little money in our pockets, to pay for things and do things. And that was an amazing thing, because anyway we were feeding volunteers, so let's feed the guests as well. And at that time, Solitude was a round kitchen, was a hexagon chick kitchen, and little low-lying walls, and everyone used to just sit on the wall and eat together. And I think most of the Auroville Greenbelt communities were like that back in the day. Um, so we had this little kitchen and a growing community, and music was going on, farming was going on. I think some acknowledgement and recognition of what we were doing and what we were trying to do slowly was coming. A few newspaper articles, a few talks here and there, and within a few years, um, I'm just trying to remember everything because it's many years ago. But after some time, my daughter was born in 2008, Chandni, and then in 2012, my son was born, Chakur, and he's 13 now. And when my son was born, um, then there was even more a question of, oh man, we don't have any money. We were really struggling to run this place. We were very happy, and still happy, but there was a because you're doing something very sort of very very that's not sort of economically based. And it became apparent to me that we really needed to pick up the restaurant and make more of a go of it. So at that time, my uh, niece Polly was visiting the farm, and I said to her, Polly, we got to make this restaurant a full-time restaurant, not just a fixed one meal a day, but a full menu with drinks and some desserts and this and that. Still, we can have the main, dish of the day, which is the thali, the daily thali, but we got to pick it up. And Polly was like, had some experience in coffee shops. So she said, like, no problem, let's do it. And when she showed up, this other girl showed up called Sarah. So Sarah was a raw vegan chef and also an exceptional artist, fine artist, painter. So Sarah had been working in the handmade paper department in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, and she showed up. And together we started Solitude Farm Cafe. You put a note in the news and notes, and you let people know that you're open every day. And boom, we started. And Sarah, very quickly, she was saying, "Hey, you got the butterfly pea flowers? Well, let's do the juice." I was like, "Oh yeah, they do the juice in Auroville. Oh, great." So we started to make the juice. And then she was like, "Look, this spinach you have here, this is the chicken spinach, basically purslane. Let's mix that with the papayas that you have and maybe a few bananas, and let's make a green smoothie." I was like, "Okay, great." So Sarah started to inspire us by to use these foods that we have, like the green papaya. That was a massive inspiration that Sarah brought to us, to use the green papaya. And um, um, and she started making the salad with the green papaya. She started cooking the green papaya, making soups with the green papaya. And then she'd make all sorts of chutneys with different spinaches and make the hibiscus juice and this. And I used to go in the field and I would started to tell the ladies, anything that's traditional to eat, show us. And they show us, different things. Like in Tamil, we have the tuduvale, the climbing pea brinjal, and the ammas would start getting more involved in it, and they say, "Oh, we'll make the rasam with that, and let's make cutlets with the plantain, and this whole sort of, I mean, not so much experimentation, more of an uncovering of the knowledge that's already there, and a sort of a revealing of it, that sort of started to happen a lot, um, until we started to have quite a diverse menu. And slowly the narrative of what we grow is a menu started to come into the sort of the tours of the farm and the speeches and stuff, because you started to say, well, God, what should we give today? Oh, we got the banana stem. Oh, let's make a curry. What we got today? Oh, we've got air potato, yam. Oh, let's make that. And what do we got today? Oh, we got the green papaya. Well, let's make a kurma with that and coconut milk. And you started to understand that by adding coconuts, coconut milk, peanuts, um, different things, adding them together, you could make a very diverse menu with local foods. And you started to see, hang on, now we're making money. We're employing this person and that person and this person, and the thing is growing. Then local foods have a value. How is it that everyone wants to eat potatoes and beetroot and cauliflower? Obviously the local foods are the way to go. And more we started to explore them, like things like the sundakai. In English we call it the turkey berry. So the turkey berry is a wild eggplant that grows, say, about, say, 8 feet 9 feet tall in a big bush, and gives these big sprigs of looks like peas, but they're small wild brinjals. And I used to cut them out because I'd say, oh, we can't sell these. Let's let's uh you know you know let's grow tomatoes instead, because we can sell the tomatoes. And and uh and then Deepa would say, no, 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 let's make a curry with this, and let's make a chutney powder with this, and let's make a vegetable dish with this. And she sort of showed how those vegetables could be used. She, along with the ammas and her mother, and other people who came to stay and visit the farm, we came to understand the what we call in Tamil the pokisham, the treasure of a Tamil nutritional heritage. And as I'm talking, I'm realizing that, there's bits that have been left out in this talk. And you see, a precursor to all of this is the soil. And when you're doing Fukuoka's natural farming, you're always returning the rice straw. You're always returning the black velvet bean. You're always returning a lot of organic matter. But when you're growing vegetables, how are you doing that? Are you only preparing compost? Like, how do you return the organic matter? So what we came up with over the years was a bed and a trench, and a bed and a trench and a bed and a trench. And in the trench, which was about, say, 20 to 20 centimeters deep, we'd fill it with weeds, grass, sticks, branches. The branches, the coarse organic matter at the bottom, and the softer organic matter more on the top. And that became our main technique in the farm. The main technique was returning organic matter back to the soil. And even there were times in the beginning, in those sort of early years, between sort of 2003 to 2000, and say, I don't know, 2012, 2013, where we were even bringing in organic matter from outside. I remember we used to go and cut the reeds that were growing in the wastewater system at the visitor center or in the town hall, and bringing them back to the farm, and putting them back into the soil. And we would slowly see that our soil composition was changing from a soil that had quite aggressive weeds, that have a value. Aggressive weeds are very important. They're reclaiming the soil, you know. Um, so they're very important in the early stages of trying to make a soil healthy again. But we started to see that they didn't appear so much anymore, and rather we had softer weeds and weeds that, you know, often that were edible, and the soil started to become, you know, very dark and with earthworms. I mean, that's over some years and years we saw that. But we did see this, you know, you could observe this very clearly. And that has happened without fail for a couple of decades now, I would say, you know, returning organic matter back to the soil when we're planting vegetables, you know, in the trenches. Now, what happened later is we started to see that in the trenches, the organic matter had decomposed, and there was options. Either you dug it out and put it back on top of the bed and had a more fertile bed to grow the vegetables in, or you planted into the trench itself. Like, say you do radish in the trench, and that soil was really nice and soft, so things like radishes went really well in there. Um, but the basic idea was that you had a vessel, which was the trench, in which to return organic matter that you started to have more and more of, because it's a positive feedback. The more healthy your land, the more, you know, organic matter that's growing. The more organic matter, the more you cut and put back, the more healthy the land, the more organic matter. So it's you could see that in places like the African pavilion next door, where they asked us to come and help make a garden. A couple of times we went there, and there was just no organic matter because there had been, you know, overgrazing, and all the trees had been cut, and so you were reduced to using like palm leaves and very coarse organic matter. There was nothing there in the soil, but you could see that over time, when you return that organic matter, there would be more growth, and as there's more growth, you could return more, and it builds up like that. So that was a massive factor in what we've been doing, is returning organic matter, to the extent that we say, returning organic matter is the first and the last technique of any farming, whatever label you wish to give, Fukuoka or, Rudolf Steiner or whatever, Bill Mollison, you name it, whatever it is, it's the organic matter returning to the soil is the most fundamental thing that you have to do. You have to grasp that. And if it's not growing on your farm, you have to bring it in from outside. So you do start to want to look at chop and drop. So growing things like Mexican sunflower that just grow prolifically, and you chop them and drop them, or gliricidia, chop and drop. And you start to understand, hang on, those plants have multiple values, like gliricidia, it's a fodder, it's a nitrogen fixer, it's of course returning organic matter, but it's also a windbreak, and it's also a structure upon which other plants can grow. And all these ideas came also from reading, permaculture manuals from Bill Mollison, reading Fukuoka's One Straw Revolution again and again and again and again and again. I read it so many times, and Bill Mollison's work, and you know just being present and observing, and nature starts to show you, hey, look, the pumpkin's climbed up the banana and it's hanging in the tree. So, oh, we can, other plants are creating, a different a structure for which other plants, creepers, can climb up. None of this is like some sort of esoteric revelation. This is all the things that you learn as you go along. If you're not farming already and you start, you will also, perceive all these things. And like right now, we're seeing ash gourd growing very well on the bananas. and also ash gourd climbing in the trees. Not huge ash gourds, but ash gourds that look a bit the size of a coconut, but really lovely. You know, it's really amazing how nature will actually teach you. You know, but if you don't return the organic matter back to the soil, there's no growth. If there's no growth, there's no community. If there's no community, there's no music festival. So you see that even the music festival is dependent on returning organic matter, because essentially people will come together for food, and food and the music and celebration. So food is at the heart of that. So I always say the return of organic matter is is everything at Solitude. Everything that we're able to talk about right now has happened due to the return of organic matter. So at this point, cafe is starting to go well, starting to go pretty cool. And we have also a basket service actually that started a little bit before the cafe as well. A basket service where we started to provide people with a weekly basket, what we call a CSA, community supported agriculture, with local foods. And of course, there's green papaya in it, but there's also eggplants, lady's finger, bananas. And it was at times a little slim, I feel, um, in its infant years, to what it is now, where you get such a diversity of plants, because we started to. I think that the trajectory that we've had is just learning the value of local foods. So back then we didn't have the insight that we have now. Like now in the basket, you get a brown paper bag, and in there you get a few hibiscus petals that we've peeled off. You get some butterfly pea, you get some soursop leaves, some lemongrass, and some vana tulsi, which is an ancient wild variety of tulsi. You go back home, you put that in boiling water, turn the gas off, and let it steep for 10 minutes. And you add a little lemon from the Assamese giant lemon that we have, that came from the original Salem trees, but then we understood that it sends up these suckers that you can cut and replant. So now we have, I don't know, 20, 30 of these trees everywhere on the farm, and we have like an endless supply of these lemons. So you give these lemons to these people every week, and they add some lemon, and you have this amazing juice, juice that has medicinal properties, juice that has a very refined taste to it, and juice that has no carbon footprint. And you can understand how the narrative of what we're sharing at Solitude has emerged. It's emerged through using these foods on a daily level. And as we went along on this, as we go along on this journey, we have seen that we've seen that these foods have particular characteristics. These local foods, who over the years you started to recognize as your community. Who is my community? My community are these foods that sustain me. And the characteristics of these foods are really, quite obvious, but we don't think about that because food has become functional. You eat to go to the office at this particular time, to do your job and to get paid in your bank account, so you can go and eat outside. um but these foods, the characteristics of local foods, are really fascinating. The first of which is that these foods grow really easily, and that we saw from the beginning. That these local foods are easy to grow, like the moringa. You break off a stick, you plug it in the ground, it germinates. Like, that's it. And yeah, that's it. That's all you have to do. And over the years, I mean, this insight didn't come immediately, but over the years, he started to realize, well, that means that that's why it's in abundance, because it grows easily. And if it's in abundance, it's non-exclusive. So non-exclusivity is a really noble virtue of these foods. That means a beggar and a king can equally access these foods. And I think that's that's very special. If you're looking at the well-being of a society, is that food is non-exclusive. The next characteristic of local food is that it's a medicine. Food is medicine. As I mentioned, the dopamine bean, the black velvet bean, and the butterfly pea is for women, for uterus, and for memory, and for antioxidants. I mean, there's some pretty big claims being thrown around on the internet right now as the butterfly pea slowly becomes sort of commercialized. But our farm isn't just a farm, it's a pharmacy. Truly, it's extraordinary. We have a number of Siddha doctors who visit us from time to time. And one of them is become a very dear friend of mine, Sundaram Pandyam from Chidambaram, and a very senior doctor. It's his depth of knowledge is quite extraordinary, and he shows me, oh, this is good for this and this is good for that. And you're like, wow, my God, Mother Nature is so benevolent. And you start to go back and you realize that, hang on, didn't I read that in the Veda that the rishi told his student, go and find me one plant that doesn't have a value. And I mean, back in the day, I don't know what it was, they had magic carpets or something, but he go around the world and come back in 100 years. He said, Swami, everything has a value. And you start seeing those things for yourself, you know, that the neem leaf has a value and the neem flower has a value and it can be cooked. And the neem, even the neem stick has a value as a toothbrush. And the papaya seed has a value as a, anti-parasite. And the papaya leaf is for dengue fever, and the resin from the drumstick is good for you, and the ponangan is for your eyes, and the moringa leaves are full of all the essential amino acids, and it goes on to some random little piece of wood that's like as part of a little weed that you don't even know the name of. Everything has a value, and over time, your awe, your admiration, your respect, your love for Mother Nature grows, because you start to understand truly how extraordinary she is and how far beyond all our incredible accomplishments of mankind that she is. And you start to realize what Fukuoka is talking about when he said, only a fool will understand nature. That's what he said when he met us, when we met him. He said, only a fool will understand nature. And you start to realize those truths for yourself. Those words you've read on the One Straw Revolution again and again and again. And as I say to people, nature will reveal herself. The teaching is in the in the life with the nature, with the growing the food, with harvesting it. As you harvest it, you're honoring her. As you eat it, you're honoring her. As you save the seeds, you're honoring her. As you share it with other people, you're honoring her. It's an honoring of the Devi, of Mother Nature, of the goddess. You know, and so many of the sort of the little anecdotes or the words or the ideas that I share in my tours, in my speeches, they all have come from this sort of self revelation, from nature showing, like, I picked up the soil and I start to say, hang on, in Europe they call her Gaia, in South America they call her Pachimama, in India they call her Bhumidev, amongst many other names. But this is a divinity, And then you think about it, hang on, yeah, this is a divinity. And look at all this beauty of nature around us and the food she offers us. And you realize that, that she is the precursor to entire civilizations. And yet mankind has come in with his anthropocentric, money centric, what can we get point of view. And he's lost sight of well-being in the process. It's created a world with incredible lifestyle diseases. Like 40 years ago, 50 years ago here, even maybe less than that, there was hardly any diabetes in the villages. And now, I think India has over 10% of the population has diabetes, which is extraordinary figure. And yet the Tamil culture is 40,000 years old. I think it was the knowledge and the understanding and the love and the gratitude and the eating of all these foods that grow around the people that facilitated and allowed for that civilization to emerge. I mean, that's pretty obvious, no? So when we turn our back on her, what happens to our cultures? This is already going into the third week of the speech. It's the more of the reflection, but I'm just trying to show you that it's by returning the organic matter. It's by seeing, oh wow, this little flower we can eat, and this little leaf we can eat. And actually the act of utilizing them on a daily level in a farm to plate cafe, feeding people, sharing with people that joy, and incorporating in that music as well is really has really been the what has given birth to this narrative, in many respects. So I think I'm gonna end it there. um I'd like to open it out for some questions, because if I keep talking, there'll be nothing left to say. I've got another 2 weeks to tell you more. So I don't know how many people there are in this who've shown up. I know there were about 19 people who signed up, but I don't know how many people have actually come, and who is going to come, who's going to watch it just on YouTube. Are there any questions?